are the writing tips and fantasy tropes you need to learn how to write the traitor the right way and create a story that will have your readers feeling betrayed and tucking their devil fruits away from the prying eyes of the seven seas. Rip my boy Thatch, he ain't did nothing wrong. Join me on the journey toward world building my own story, as well as providing you, yes you, with all the writing tips you need to write good characters and make your story stand out from all the rest. What is up, you muffin munching muggles? Welcome to Fiction and Reality, where we help you, yes you, become the most devilishly gifted human that you know you are and that you knew you always could be. So just who is the veiled traitor? That's a good question. Why don't we ask your mom? Sorry. The one who walks forth with a spackling smile but a knife hidden behind their back. A traitor is one who betrays another's trust or is false to an obligation or duty. A traitor is someone who says they'll watch your back. They'll hold it down for you in the clink.
Do you really expect me to not push you up against the wall, biatch?
Whoa.
All right, hey, that's just the way we talk in the clink.
But in your darkest of moments, when they swore they would be your light, hi-ho Cheerios you to the feds. Within your story, the traitor will serve as an ace in the hole, a device of secrecy so covert that they spur discovery within your reader's mind with each flip of the page. For each turn, the angst to peel back the veil another inch grows insufferable. Maybe there's subversion within, such as with the warriors in Attack on Titan, a ploy to steal the golden key, the founding titan, a key that unlocks the vault of infinite discoveries that gives the bearer the strength and capacity to bring the world to ruin, a truly unforgivable act of espionage. Unless you're eating a pie. Then the consequences for curb stomping a whole squad of scouts and turning a night out at Denny's into a cupcake cream fest vanishes away like sprinkles in the wind. As with Itachi Uchiha, perhaps information that should remain wholly to conspirators is leaking to the opposition, information that only the in-group should know. Whatever that mechanism is, the traitor ushers in an erosive element of the unknown, parching the buds of your readers and stirring the thirst for revelation. Who is the traitor? Why are they doing the things they are doing? How are they hiding themselves as friendly? And how will you snuff them out? The traitor is more than a mere plot twist. They are the shadow lurking behind trust, the whisper in the dark that turns allies into suspects. Their presence ensures that tension never wanes, that every conversation drips with subtext, and that every revelation deepens the web of deceit. They are the embodiment of uncertainty, the silent hand that reshapes the course of events with each clandestine move. And as their mask slowly crumbles, their betrayal will either shatter the world you built or make it all the more compelling. Hiding betrayal. The driving force of the traitor that threads through each chapter, an element of the unknown, and the trick for you as the writer or creator is to keep their identity concealed until their character arc approaches their apex. So how do you just give enough to the reader to keep them asking questions but not give away the identity of your traitor? Well, one way you can start is by leveraging the high ground.
It's over, Anakin! I have the high ground!
One thing you can do, of course, if you're dealing with writing dark fantasy or fiction worlds in general, is give that character a power that would lead the reader away from the trail your traitor is traversing. For example, maybe you don't unveil the entire course of your traitor's power and the true nature of its ability, an ability that allows your character to swipe the information they need and feed it to the opposition when used out of sight of the comrades they betrayed and leech off of as if they were informants. Whether your character is shooting flames out of their hoo-ha or pissing out cotton candy, respecting the utility of how you design that power could work wonders in elevating aspects of your traitor. When your traitor's the one folding all the cards,
Here's my card.
or holding the hammer,
Oh, please be my guest.
those they betray are rendered powerless at the heel of their own arrogance, and thus must race the clock, a countdown toward their imminent demise, which can only be thwarted by finding and unmasking the devil within their core. Aside from leveraging power, understand that the traitor may have weaponized fables and lies to gain vantage. I mean, liars gonna lie, right? Uncovering yet another method which you can use to conceal your traitor's identity before the big reveal, we can explore the chain of lies. Now, lies are as lethal as a tongue that is used to sheath them. My traitor's greatest power in my story is, of course, the power of manipulation, the power to transform a tight-knit band of knights, willing to die for each other in a vat of blood, into a shanty table of broken allegiances, thwarted alliances, and cruel clashings fueled by misplaced wrath, sprung from the axe of deceit. The lying traitor will not scratch out sprinkling a dash of poison into the coffee and then pointing the finger at an innocent sleeping comrade, or at the very least raise suspicions about every action except their own. When implementing this element, you must understand that the goal of the traitor is to disrupt, sow chaos, and create confusion, which allows the traitor to buy time to transition to their next plan of action, and illustrates how the lies themselves slot tokens of curiosity that spin the reader towards flipping open the veil of truths, spurring a curiosity, calling the reader to pry open the shroud in the heat of arrogance. When working towards this stepwise reveal, allow the chaos to guide your story toward order and truth by sprinkling pockets of truth within each chapter, inching closer and closer. There's also the concept of being out of sight and out of mind, and not out of sight like a destructive disabled or anything to that effect. I'm talking, why is Annie always nowhere to be found when the female Titan is punting everyone's head in? Forget it. Essentially, take your traitor out of the line of sight of your reader or audience within your story. However, don't isolate them by themselves. You also want to slip other characters who may not be your traitor out the back door toward vanishing from the sight of your reader. This adds an additional layer of disorientation. There should be actions that track the traitor's motives in which the reader can funnel into their own worldview of the happenings of your fictional world through. Actions they may even use to derive their own conclusion about who exactly is leaking information or slaughtering innocents behind friendly lines. When your character is out of the line of sight, then your audience is forced to ponder, forced to plot the pieces of the puzzle, or may be completely oblivious to start. Consider creating an identity that the traitor assumes, such as the Titan forms of the Marleyan warriors, that invites the traitor to steer away from their false camaraderie and assume their full-fledged role of treachery, and a form they can use interchangeably when cloaking themselves back in a veil of deceit. The deception of your character should not simply shock, but challenge the audience's perception, forcing them to engage with the mystery and question their own assumptions. By subtly threading their motives and disguises into the story, you allow the revelation to feel inevitable yet devastating. And the end, when the mask falls and the truth is exposed, it should not only redefine past events, but reshape the very foundation of the world you built. Switching personas. If you're looking for a way to shroud your traitor's identity, look no further than the false persona. When we're surrounded by people who we believe are in resonance with our own code of morals and ethics and share fragments of our own desires, we believe they share a part of our identity and thus may be more prone to opening up to them. In this case, the traitor can either don a mask of virtue or a mask of sugary sweet benevolence, even one of malice breeding chaos and destruction. Whatever mask they take on will depend on where their victims' virtues lie and what they deem as the most streamlined manner to getting their targets to spill the beans. This method allows both your characters and the audience to remain oblivious to who your traitor is and makes for a concrete route to mounting tension from chapter to chapter as the actions of the traitor begin to bloom into fruition and assert their impact on the living cast of characters. Itachi donned the mask of a devil while fighting against his brother, acting as if his motives were simply to vex the Leaf, and Uchiha, in pursuit of an upper echelon of power, slipping into the core of the Akatsuki to spy but never revealing critical information about the Leaf Village to its members, and even infiltrating the Leaf to covertly warn of the Akatsuki's motive but retreating to avoid engagement with the Leaf. At the end of his tenure, stumbling toward his brother while swathed in blood, smiling at him and breaking a window of light to his true motives. You may also want to understand what drives a traitor to betray. We can start with revenge. Ah yes, sweet, sweet revenge. The individual in kind seeks out vengeance for what they perceive as having been wronged and transforms their perception of the trusted into the vile. Instead of hugs of honey, they come upright stabbing with their knives. Treachery belabored by revenge tends to be a course of wrath that's stirred by mounting repressed trauma for some syndicate group or class of society who, through their actions, left the one actively seeking vengeance believing that they are a blight upon the earth and their actions only lead to their further destitution, which may or may not be true depending on where the traitor's virtues lie. We can of course take Geto, who through his failure to protect Rico, and the perceived mistreatment of sorcerers by the degrading, entitled non-sorcerers, which eventually drove him over the edge to reject the world of non-sorcerers and sorcerers living hand in hand, and ultimately led him to decide to take it upon himself to take revenge upon the world of non-sorcerers and sculpt a reality where only sorcerers could thrive. Are you a subscriber because you like the video? Or did you like the video because you were a subscriber? If you're enjoying the video right now, go ahead and leave a like to show some love. In fact, revenge can simply be out of heat-seeking, bristling rage that stirs up after witnessing someone with the gumption to resist against the postulates they've put into play. Within my novel, the traitor in my story, though covert in their ploy and plan, and though every heinous act of treachery they committed planted another spiked thorn into their innards, They could not part with the true fact that they had some sprinklings of sweetness melting in their tongue while gauging how the great Arcanist nations were forced for once in their life to run around like chickens with their heads cleaved off the stump like the natives of Barren Valley once did. As with everything, you'll want to add background to the teeming embers of revenge, allowing the reader to understand what gave rise to it, maybe jostling with your character's backstory a bit to establish a core connection between the character and reader, and avoiding running the risk of being cliche by adding an element of uniqueness. Revenge is a force that consumes, a smoldering ember that flares into an unquenchable inferno, leaving neither the betrayer nor the betrayed unscathed. Whether rooted in justice or delusion, it twists perception, turning righteousness, fury into a blade that cuts indiscriminately. And yet, in the end, as the traitor watches the world they despise unravel, they must face the harrowing truth. Was it truly vengeance they saw, or simply a means to fill the hollow void left behind? Another reason why someone may betray someone else is out of self-preservation. The mechanism of betrayal I use for the character in my novel is somewhat of a mix of elements involving revenge, guilt, and most predominantly within my story, self-preservation. Now, when you hear self-preservation, you may think of something like Reiner betraying the people of Paradis to uphold his duty as a warrior, to elude the risk of retaliation against his own kin for coming back to Marley empty-handed. Whatever the case, he was doing what he had to do to protect his own family and position as an Eldian warrior. Something we see come to fruition in this iconic scene, which I can't play the music to because of copyright. However, within my novel, the mechanisms of self-preservation isn't driven by fear, well, not in the imminent physical danger sense or blackmail, but rather a threat that compels my character to commit heinous and vile acts of betrayal, which result in the deaths of dozens of Red Scarves. What is this threat, you ask? The destruction of an item or locket, a sacred item to her, serving as the last fragmented memory of the family she lost in the Veinless War, in the battle of fables between the great Arcanist nations who scarred Barren Valley in their scorched trail of greed. The reason I went with this mode of self-preservation is that it orders a double-edged sword type effect. As with each chapter, a small nugget of who the traitor might be is revealed, and when you find that their own grievances are being weaponized against them, and the threat of destruction of the soul gem or locket that holds those fleeting memories drives them unwillingly to commit grand atrocities, that encourages the reader to develop sympathy for the suffering of the traitor and poses the question of morality versus grievance. Pushing beyond the device of self-preservation, a person might betray another simply out of greed. Now, I'm not saying that that deserved it, not saying that, but that yami yami no mi would have had me acting up too. The greatest of riches, the mere unkempt desire for power, can drive a man in characters like Blackbeard to do the unspeakable and cast loyalty and kinship to the wind. Maybe your traitor is being led by a higher power, being allured by the promise of wealth, riches, and land. Maybe the traitor is engaged in active war, fighting alongside their soldiers, and there are advantages to defecting the opposition and bribes that entice them to do so. The promise of a power, the promise of a high status position under their statesmanship. Whatever the reason, the Union is heaved into this bristling backburner to sear and fry away to ashes in light of a greater promise. Traitors struck by greed are compromised and exposed agents of chaos, shelled within windows of self-preservation, and like Blackbeard, primed to commit whatever treachery is imaginable, as long as they reserve themselves the right to climb up to the upper echelon of the totem pole. When implementing this component to your story, you should use every opportunity to ensure that the promise that the traitor is abandoning their duties, obligations, and kinship for is one that is contextually given with respect to the character's worldview, refines the scope of the character, and drives the plot forward, rather than being a bland black and white case of rags to riches simply just because. Remember, a well-crafted traitor is not just a plot device, but a reflection of the world they inhabit, one whose choices ripple through the story with weight and consequence. Let's take a more intricate look at what lies within the core of a traitor and the type of internal conflict they undergo. One of the most compelling internal conflicts for a traitor is mask versus true self, where they have lived under a false identity for so long that they begin to question who they truly are. The act of deception may have started as a necessity, an infiltration, a survival tactic, or a means to an end, but over time the lines blur between the role they play and the person they once were. This creates a slow unraveling of identity as the traitor grapples with whether they are still in control of this masked identity, or if this masked identity has become their reality. Deception may provide them with protection, but the deeper they hide behind the illusion, the more they risk losing their sense of self. This differs from the bout of revenge versus redemption. This is where the traitor essentially engages based simply on retaliatory premises and thus acted on vengeance. The character is forced to battle with relinquishing wrathful tendencies even if they lose something to the conflict at hand and weigh whether or not the price of revenge is worth compromising their ethics or morals for. This creates a slow identity crisis as the traitor questions whether their hatred justifies their betrayal or if redemption is still possible. Revenge may provide the traitor with a fleeting sense of justice, but the deeper they sink into their vengeance, the more they risk losing themselves. The battle between retribution and redemption forces them to confront whether their actions are truly justified or merely a means to mask their own suffering. In the end, the choice they make, whether to cling to their wrath or seek a path toward absolution, will define not just their fate, but the very soul of their story. The traitor also may undergo a bout of loyalty versus self-preservation in which they must decide between relinquishing duties and responsibility to comrades, liquidating unions of friends, or instinctively protecting themselves. This may create a situation where the character may seek a window to justify their treachery for the greater good of themselves or generalized self-interest. Loyalty binds them to their past, but survival urges them to sever those ties, forcing them into a painful reckoning. As they navigate the weight of their choices, they may convince themselves that betrayal is not an act of selfishness, but a necessary sacrifice. Yet, in the end, the question remains, was their survival worth the cost of everything they've abandoned or not? If you took something from this video, I want you to take a moment to crack that subscribe button below and like the video. Like the video. It pushes these videos out so that others can take key tokens that you've gained. So do your fellow comrades a favor. I will leave a link to my socials in the description below. Share your thoughts on the video. If you want more info on how to improve your story, feel free to check out some of my other videos by clicking right here. Make sure to leave suggestions and understand that writers, world builders, and storytellers aiming to perfect writing techniques and enhance their storytelling and world building are all welcome. And with that, remember, if ever you're lost in a forest, you were, strip your mind from fantasy and look to the window of the world, and there your mind will run free.